Side of the table once back in.
A couple of years ago, I was in Sweden, and I was so impressed by the Swedish cities. First of all, they levy their own income tax. So they have a steady, reliable source of income. And there's the mayor, and the mayor appoints what is essentially a cabinet. So there's an environment minister, an economics minister, and they all have their own portfolios. And the cities run a more or less complete kind of operation. And the sort of angst that we deal with on a daily basis here in Toronto is completely absent from the situation there.
Did they have political parties there?
Yes, they do.
Do you like that development?
I do. I think it works, Steve. It gives people, they know where they stand, they know what they're voting for, rather than voting for somebody because he's the only name I recognize out of the 15 on this ballot. I mean, Peter Tabens in my ward got defeated because somebody came up with some other candidate whose name was the same. Nobody knew who was who. You know, it doesn't work, and I'm just saying that we need, I mean, the city has to go through a budgeting process every year. That's ridiculous. How much time do we waste doing that? And then how much time does our city council waste debating whether we're going to put "We support our troop" decals on the city fleet? This is nonsense, you know, and we have to get way beyond that. And as I say, the Swedish example, which I'm speaking of simply because I was there and I saw it, I was so impressed. They were calm, they went about their business, they knew what they were doing, and of course they're 30 years ahead of us.
Let me follow up on the party politics aspect, because there are a lot of people who just hate the thought of party politics coming to City Hall. What do you think of the idea, David?
Well, I wouldn't have got my job as budget chief.
If it were party politics?
Yeah, that's right.
Why not?
Well,
David's, you're nonpartisan.
Yeah, well, no, David's NDP. I'm on the blue side of the house.
Right.
And he wouldn't have, I don't think, been allowed to choose me as budget chair. At the end of the day, our budget's passed with close on 2/3 of the votes.
John, what do you like? Do you like the idea of party politics at City Hall?
I wouldn't want to see a replication of the provincial and federal parties at City Hall, because I don't think that there is a I don't think there's a sufficient analog between the issues that they're facing with the ones at the local level. I think you could have it ones that are based on City of Toronto issues, and that would make a lot of sense. They'd probably straddle both the divide between the Tories and the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens.
Yeah, but would it not be irresistible for the parties at the senior levels, the Conservatives, the Liberals, the New Democrats, to want to just replicate what they've got at City Hall?
Well, I don't know. I mean, usually the best way to win if you're a center-right candidate is to get Liberals and Conservatives together. You know, so right now it's not irresistible.
It also starts to look like there's two closet parties at City Hall right now. There's certainly a sense of us and them when I watch it, and everyone seems to know who the them is and who the us is.
But I think it's more urban-suburban than it is right versus left.
Well, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure that's true. But here's my frustration. You can do certain things. I forced through a 3-year budget. And we spent 6 months debating a 3-year budget. We set our mill rates and our debt levels and that. And boy, that was a big policy debate. And why did I do it? One, because I wanted stability, because they just have a stupid system right now that exists in Toronto. You know, you debate the budget year started with January 1st. You debate the budget you debate the budget till March, the first quarter's gone, right? But maybe in March you get a decision. It takes 3 months to translate that down through the huge bureaucracy. So the administration gets started maybe in June on it. So if you're anything, you're going to close a library. You have to close 2 now because you only got 6 months to get the year's savings. And before you know it, you're preparing for next year's budget. So you're always dealing with last year's budget crisis. And I believe, you know, as my friend Robin Sears, who's been on the show a few times, says, you know, says the budget and taxes are ideology stripped of rhetoric. So I would argue that council is very ineffective at dealing with budget.
But the alternative should be...
And that the administration is very effective at managing council and dealing with the budget. And that's not that. When you get to a 3-year budget, you can actually talk about change. You can manage staffing levels, labor costs. You can actually look at not just dealing with the cost side, but you can actually look at when you make investments in infrastructure and transit, there's an uplift in property. You can calculate increases in return on investments from that. And what I see is council debating. I watched this stupid debate about a couple of councillors debating over the Sony name on the
old Hummingbird.
On the old Hummingbird. And apparently he had violated the rules because he wasn't supposed to send it. And one councillor got up and lectured him that there was a committee and a process. And obviously this newer councillor didn't know the process. And I'm sitting there saying, Your job isn't to debate how big the sign in the Sony building is. Your job is to actually have coherent building development standards for aesthetics and scale and organization, and debate that and be accountable for that. But what happens here is they pass policies, and then half of council, it seems, dissents and tries to get out of actually having the policy enforced. So I read through the development policy, and I tried to buy a condo, and I started seeing all these ridiculous things: surface parking lots, buildings with parking in front of it, buildings that didn't conform. And what I realized is that people pass these wonderful, development standards at council, and then every council who doesn't like it goes out with NIMBY alliances in their neighborhood and undoes it. So there's no stability to the policy framework, and that's what a mature legislative body.
Okay.
So get into governance and get out of nitpicking and NIMBY, which seems to be the pastime of too many of our elected friends.
With about 3 minutes to go here, let me put one more thing on the table for us to discuss, and that is to this side of the table. Could they implement something that isn't necessarily the strong mayor system that you so dislike, but does address some of these governance issues that we've heard from the other side of the table? Do you think that compromise is out there?
Me?
Yeah.
Sure, I think we can, but I think we have to do it together. And I just don't see the urgency because, you said that megacity doesn't work. Well, we had a council of 57 under Mel Lastman, who was really quite a hands-off kind of guy. And things did work quite well. I mean, some of us were in opposition, which is healthy. I mean, David Miller was in opposition, Jack Layton was in opposition, and I was in opposition, to name three. But it worked. And you vote on the issues. I vote for most of the issues that Lastman proposed, not the Olympics, but the other ones. I voted for most of the things that Miller proposes on housing and on transit, the environment. So you deal with the issues. I just don't see the urgency in any kind of centralizing of power. If you go back to the purpose of local government that makes its difference, it has to be the only party that really matters is the People's Party.
And the people are not showing up to vote. It just shows how disengaged they are.
But they don't come to our meetings anymore. They don't, because there's a cynicism.
Or are they disengaged because nothing's getting done?
No, that's not the case, because they come out on local developments. That's the big one. And that's dropped off dramatically, because you should see how they're handled when it gets down to City Hall. They're handled with contempt, with rudeness, lack of respect. And we ignore what they say. You should, if you have some good ideas from the community, you modify a proposal. That's your job to do that. And it's this thing about we're interested in city building and about the future and long-term plans. I'm interested in a livable city with stable neighborhoods in where residents have an opportunity to debate and have real input into change taking place in their community and in their city. And that takes time. When you talked about your budget process, your 3-year budget process, taking 6 months, I suspect you went out and did a lot of meetings with community groups. That's the kind of thing. It's healthy. Democracy is messy. It's time-consuming. It's costly. But that's what it's all about.
Now, there's a speech to go to the barricades on. Well, here's something from the other side of the table. How are you going to compete with that?
Politics, whatever else it may be, is perception. And from where I sit, unlike where you sit, I detect an enormous amount of cynicism. And I detect a growing sense amongst star readers anyway, that the city is in a crisis and that the city is desperately in need of leadership. And I think that, the province and the federal government have become the enemies in the 21st century. And we feel that very acutely. And a stronger mayor would help us stand up to those new enemies that we face, because they are our enemies. And the future, not just in Canada, but around the world, is going to unfold in its cities. And whatever we can do to strengthen our cities, we should do, and we should do it now.
We should be treating the other levels of government as the enemies all the time. You can't have everything you want.
We shouldn't, but we have to.
You had a left-of-center mayor who was fiscally responsible. He reduced debt, and he reduced the budget, and he reduced staffing, because that was the reality. That's the pragmatism that has to take hold when you're running things. And so you don't become a prisoner to ideology. And we have to go to these other levels of government, and you shouldn't see them as the enemy.
We are a prisoner to one thing at this table, and that is the clock. And sadly, it is up.
Thank you.
But I do have enough time left to thank you all for being here this evening. So can I thank Glenn and Chris and John for being here on that side of the table, and David and Michael for being here on the other side of the table. Thanks for a great discussion tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, for more information about tonight's guests and a link to these peace, they're all putting peace signs up now. A link to the City of Toronto's blueprint for fiscal stability and economic prosperity, which was brandished earlier in the program, please visit the agenda online at tvo.org. Tonight's program was produced by Sahar Deshmukh and Stacey Dunseith, and you can read Stacey's thoughts on civic governance on our Inside Agenda producers blog. Michael Walker's going there already, I can see it. Also online at tvo.org. Okay, that is the agenda for Tuesday, March 18th, 2008.